Picture a scientist. Not a cartoon villain in a white coat, a real one, mid-40s, a little tired, coffee going cold beside a stack of journals. She has spent 15 years studying the human brain. She has mapped it in more detail than any generation before her. She can point to the exact cluster of neurons that fires when you feel fear, the exact region that processes the sound of your name, the precise electrical pattern that lights up when you fall in love. She knows the brain better than almost anyone alive. And late one Tuesday night, sitting in the silence of her lab at a research university you would recognize, she looks up from her data and says out loud to no one, "But I still have no idea what's in there." She is not talking about neurons. She is not talking about chemistry. She is talking about you. The experience of being you, aware, awake, thinking, feeling, reading these words right now with something behind your eyes that is registering meaning. That is the mystery she cannot solve. And she's not alone. The greatest minds of the last century have circled that mystery the way you circle a fire in the dark, close enough to feel the warmth, never close enough to touch the center. There is one mystery on this list that scientists have tried to study in a lab. They built machines to measure it. They ran the experiments. And then something happened that nobody writes about in the textbooks. We will get to that, but not yet. Because first, I need to take you somewhere most people have never gone in a conversation like this. I need to take you to the place where science ends. Not where science fails, not where science is wrong, where it simply runs out of road. Where the most rigorous, most honest researchers on Earth pick up their instruments, take a long look at what is in front of them, and quietly say, "We don't know." There are 7 of those places, 7 mysteries, deep, verified, and fully modern that no laboratory has resolved. 7 gaps in the secular map of reality, so large that some of the greatest atheists who ever lived looked into them and walked away believers. This is not a video about religion versus science. This is a video about what science itself has found at the edge of its own territory. Let's start with the strangest one.
Mystery 1. Consciousness. You are reading this right now. Think about that for a moment. Not the words, but the act. Something inside you is processing symbols on a screen and converting them into meaning, memory, and emotion. You have opinions about what you are hearing. You are, at this exact moment, aware of the fact that you are aware. That experience, the raw inner life of being a person, is called consciousness, and in the world of neuroscience and philosophy of mind, it has a formal name: the hard problem. David Chalmers, one of the most respected philosophers of mind alive today, named it that in 1995. Not the tricky problem, not the complex problem, the hard problem. Because every other question in neuroscience, memory, perception, language, emotion, can in theory be explained by showing which neurons fire and why. But consciousness is different. Here's what most people miss. You can map every single neuron in the human brain. You can trace every electrical signal. You can watch the lights come on region by region on an fMRI scan. And at the end of all of that, after the most detailed biological inventory in human history, you will still not have explained why there is something it is like to be you. Why the information being processed in your skull doesn't just compute in the dark the way a calculator does, but lights up from the inside with experience. The philosopher Thomas Nagel put it this way: science can tell you everything about the bat's brain, the sonar signals, the auditory cortex, the neural pathways. What it cannot tell you is what it is like to be the bat. what the darkness sounds like from the inside. The ancient Hebrews had a word for this inner life. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, God breathes into the nostrils of the man he has formed from dust, and the text says, the man became a living nephesh. The Hebrew word nephesh, sometimes translated soul, sometimes being, sometimes person, carries a weight the English word soul doesn't quite hold. It means something like the animated, experiencing, feeling center of a creature, the thing that makes you not just a body that moves, but a person who notices. Science has found the body. It has found the movement. The nephesh remains unexplained. Roger Penrose, mathematical physicist, Oxford professor, one of the most decorated scientists of the 20th century, spent years developing a theory of consciousness he called orchestrated objective reduction. He believed consciousness might be rooted in quantum processes inside the microtubules of neurons, not just electricity, something deeper, something that touches the fundamental structure of reality. His theory is still unproven, still contested, still alive, still being tested. What it represents is a mind, one of the greatest scientific minds of the modern era, standing at the edge of the map and pointing into territory that does not have a scientific name yet. The Bible named it thousands of years ago, and the mystery is still open.
Mystery 2. Near-death experiences. In 1991, a woman named Pam Reynolds was clinically dead for over an hour. Not in a metaphorical sense, not in the "her heart stopped briefly" sense. Her body temperature was lowered to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Her heartbeat was stopped. Her brain waves went flat. The blood was drained from her head to allow surgeons to operate on a brain aneurysm at the base of her skull. By every clinical definition available to modern medicine, Pam Reynolds was not alive. She came back. And when she did, she described in precise detail the bone saw the surgeon used to open her skull, a tool she had never seen before, shaped like a toothbrush with a small circular blade. She described the conversation the surgical team had while she was on the table. She described the music playing in the operating room. She described leaving her body and moving through a tunnel toward a light so warm she said it felt like going home. The surgical team confirmed every detail she could not have known. Pam Reynolds is not alone. She is not even unusual. In 2001, a Dutch cardiologist named Pim van Lommel published a landmark study in The Lancet, one of the most respected medical journals in the world. He and his team followed 344 cardiac arrest patients across 10 hospitals over a period of 8 years. 18% of them reported near-death experiences. They reported leaving their bodies. They reported tunnels and light and encounters with deceased relatives. They reported a life review, every moment of their lives played back with emotional weight attached. Here is the detail that stops scientists cold. Several of these patients reported accurate observations of the resuscitation room during the period when their brains showed zero electrical activity. Not minimal activity, zero, a flat line. The brain, as far as modern science can measure, was not running, and yet something was watching. Van Lommel published his findings not as a religious man making a religious argument, but as a scientist confronting data he could not explain. He wrote that medical factors cannot account for the occurrence of near-death experience, that all patients had a cardiac arrest and were clinically dead, with the electroencephalogram going flat. He did not know what to do with the data. He published it anyway. The Greek New Testament uses a word that the English translation flattens out almost entirely. In John chapter 3, verse 8, Jesus speaks to a Pharisee named Nicodemus in the dark of night about something that cannot be seen or controlled. He uses the word pneuma, wind, spirit, breath. In Greek, all three meanings live inside a single word. You cannot hold pneuma. You cannot stop it at a border. It moves where it moves, and you hear the sound of it, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. That is what Jesus said the Spirit is like. Van Lommel's patients felt something move through them, something that did not stop when the brain did, something that moved where it moved. Science does not have a word for it yet. The New Testament does. But it gets stranger. There is a case, documented, verified, repeated in the medical literature, of a woman identified as Maria, a migrant worker who had a cardiac arrest in a Seattle hospital in 1977. During her resuscitation, she reported leaving her body, floating up through the hospital roof, and landing on a third-floor window ledge on the north side of the building. On that ledge, she said, she saw a single dark blue tennis shoe, left foot, the little toe area scuffed, the lace tucked under the heel. A social worker named Kimberly Clark Sharp went to the north side of the building. She found a third-floor window ledge she could not see from inside the hospital, and on that ledge, a dark blue tennis shoe, left foot, scuffed at the little toe, lace tucked under the heel. A woman whose brain was not running saw a shoe on a ledge she had never visited in a part of a building she could not have seen from her room. Science calls this an anomaly. The Bible calls it evidence of something that does not end when the body does.
Mystery 3. The Cambrian Explosion. Now we leave the hospital and go back, much further back. 540 million years ago, the oceans of this planet were mostly empty. Simple creatures, single-celled organisms, soft-bodied animals, nothing with eyes or shells or complex internal systems. The fossil record is quiet. Hundreds of millions of years of quiet. And then, in what geologists call a geological instant, a window of roughly 5 million years, nearly 40 major animal body plans appear simultaneously in the fossil record. Eyes, shells, legs, nervous systems, digestive systems, creatures of stunning complexity, fully formed, with no clear ancestors in the layers below. Biologists call it the Cambrian explosion. Charles Darwin called it a problem. In The Origin of Species, Darwin himself wrote that the sudden appearance of complex animal groups in the fossil record was a serious difficulty for his theory. He believed that future fossil discoveries would fill in the gaps, the slow, gradual chain of transitional forms that his model required. He died believing the gaps would close. 160 years later, the gaps are wider than they were in his lifetime. Pay attention to this. The Cambrian explosion is not a religious argument. It is a data problem. The data shows complexity appearing faster than the standard evolutionary mechanism, random mutation plus natural selection, can account for. Evolutionary biologists are not hiding this. They are debating it fiercely in peer-reviewed journals right now. Stephen Jay Gould, perhaps the most famous evolutionary biologist of the 20th century, a man who had no religious commitments whatsoever, spent a significant portion of his career wrestling with the Cambrian data and arguing that standard Darwinian gradualism was insufficient to explain it. He proposed a different mechanism. So did others. The debate continues. What does not continue is the pretense that this is settled.
The book of Genesis opens with a word the ancient rabbis spent centuries unpacking. The very first verse says in Hebrew, "In the beginning, God created." The verb used, bara, is a word reserved in the Hebrew Bible exclusively for acts of divine creation. Human beings make things. They build, they shape, they form. But bara, that word belongs only to God. It describes creation from nothing, creation with no prior material, creation that does not depend on what came before it. The fossil record looks like something that does not depend on what came before it. 40 body plans, 5 million years from almost nothing. The fossil record does not tell us who did it. It tells us that something or someone did.
Mystery 4. The fine-tuning of the universe. Let me give you a number. 1 in 10 raised to the power of 123. That is the probability, calculated not by a theologian, not by a pastor, but by the physicist Roger Penrose, that the low entropy state of the early universe occurred by chance. Written out, that number would require more zeros than there are atoms in the observable universe to express it on paper. Penrose called it absurdly small. He was being generous. Here's what that number represents. The universe we live in operates according to a set of physical constants, numbers that govern how matter behaves, how gravity pulls, how electromagnetism works, how the strong nuclear force holds atoms together. These constants are not derived from any deeper theory. They are simply the values the universe has. And if any one of them were even slightly different, not dramatically different, not doubled or halved, but shifted by 1 part in a million, or 1 part in a billion, or in some cases 1 part in 10 to the 60th power, the universe would be incapable of producing stars, planets, chemistry, or life. Change the gravitational constant by a fraction too small to write out longhand, and stars collapse before they can burn. Change the ratio of electromagnetic force to gravity by a hair, and atoms cannot form. Change the cosmological constant, the energy density of empty space, by any amount beyond the most vanishingly tiny margin, and the universe either collapses back on itself in seconds or expands so fast that matter never has a chance to clump together into anything. Every dial, every constant, every ratio, set exactly right. The astronomer Fred Hoyle spent most of his career as an atheist. He was brilliant, combative, and proud of it. He was also the man who coined the term Big Bang, and he coined it mockingly, as an insult, because he believed the theory was absurd. Later in his career, after a lifetime of studying the nuclear resonances that allow carbon to form inside stars, the resonances without which life as we know it would be chemically impossible, Hoyle said something that his colleagues found deeply uncomfortable. He said the universe looked like a put-up job. A put-up job, the language of a man who suspects he is being had, who suspects that the numbers are too clean, the setup too precise, the outcome too specific to be accidental. Hoyle never crossed into faith, but he crossed out of comfortable atheism. He spent the rest of his life arguing that intelligence of some kind must be involved in the structure of reality. Stephen Hawking acknowledged the fine-tuning in A Brief History of Time. He spent years looking for a naturalistic explanation, a model of the universe that would remove the need for a beginning, and with it, the need for a beginner. He was honest enough to admit he had not found one. The ancient Greeks had a word for the rational order they saw embedded in the structure of reality. They called it logos, reason, word, logic, the principle by which the cosmos holds together and makes sense. The Stoics used it. Heraclitus used it.
And then, in the opening line of the Gospel of John, a Jewish fisherman's disciple sat down and wrote something that shook the Greek-speaking world. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. John was not writing poetry. He was making a claim about physics. The rational order embedded in the structure of reality, the Logos that Hoyle stumbled toward and Hawking circled and Penrose calculated, John said it had a name. John said it had a face. John said it walked into human history and people touched it with their hands. That claim remains the most contested and the most remarkable in the history of human thought. If this video is landing somewhere real for you, if you're feeling something shift in the way you see the world, hit the subscribe button now, because what comes next is where the mystery gets personal. Not just cosmic, not just intellectual, personal.